بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We stopped last session at the timing of Salatul Jum'ah, and that the majority of scholars say that the timing of Salatul Jum'ah is the same as Salatul Dhuhr, except for the Hanbali school of thought where they say that it can be offered earlier, but they go to an extreme where they make the time which it can begin similar to the time of Eid, and this is too extreme and there is no evidence backing it up, and that Shaykh Ibn Baz and Ibn Uthaymeen say that it is possible to before Dhuhr time according to the authentic hadiths such as hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah, may Allah be pleased with him and with his father in Sahih Muslim and elsewhere. And we continue with the sermon. Now, giving a sermon known as khutbah for Jumu'ah is a condition for its validity, and it is one of the pillars of Jumu'ah, which means that if a person goes and offers the salat without offering the khutbah, his salat is invalid, and those who pray behind him, and his Jum'ah by default is also not valid. And he did not pray Dhuhr or 4 rak'ahs, which means that what he had done is not related neither to Jumu'ah nor to Dhuhr. The reason that he did not offer, or he did not, we might have mentioned that some scholars, or the majority of them, say that the khutbah compensates for the missing 2 rak'ahs. But this is not authentic. Yet it is one of their suggestions, or one of the ideas they came up with. Now, what is recommended in respect of the sermon, the khutbah itself? Some, before going into the recommendations, made it a condition, made it mandatory that every sermon of Jum'ah must include the Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, a verse from the Qur'an, and the Prophet's salutation. But we do not have any evidence to back this up. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ used to always do these things, especially in what is known as Khutbatul Hajah. Khutbatul Hajah is the introduction of lectures, of sermons, of great khutbahs, whenever the Prophet used to alayhi salatu wasalam address the ummah. And it goes like, Inna alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lah wa man yudlil fala hadiya lah wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Then he recites the 3 ayahs. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته يا أيها الناس إن اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة يا أيها الناس اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا. 3 verses or 4, because the last one has 2 verses in it. And then he says إن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر. In it, the Shahada, the verses of the Qur'an, and the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, because this is a hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. But again, we cannot say that this is mandatory or this is a condition of the Salat, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So what is recommended in the khutbah? Well, it's recommended to supplicate for the Muslim community. And again, this is not something that was stated by the Prophet himself alayhi salatu wasalam. These are all ijtihad. These are all things that the scholars came up with. It's done so that we deliver a message every week. What is usually this message? Well, it has to deal with the Muslims. And among the very important things that Muslims need in their lives, supplication. So when you supplicate to the Muslim community, you make dua and you ask Allah Azza wa Jal for their welfare and their well-being and their provisions, etc. This encourages the worshippers to come over and over, feel optimistic that Allah will accept their dua because they have attended this khutbah. And what the supplications should be in? Anything. Forgiveness of Allah Azza wa Jal, repentance, provision, paying off debts, health, wealth, etc. Also, the text says, pray to the rulers to be good, to be God-fearing and guided towards the benefits in their communities. And this is, again, not stated upon neither in the Qur'an nor in the Sunnah. But the issue is that Al-Imam Ahmad, one of the great Imams of the schools of thought, said, if I were to know that I have one accepted and answered da'wah or supplication, I would devote it to the Muslim ruler. So he would not say, oh Allah, grant me money, pay my debts off, oh Allah, guide my children, restore my health. He would devote that, asking Allah Azza wa Jal to make the Muslim ruler fair and just and to guide him to Islam. Why is that? He says, because when the ruler is righteous and fair, the whole community benefits from it. We've seen what Umar ibn Abdul Aziz had done in only to that everything was restored as if it was at the time of the four rightly guided caliphs. May Allah be pleased with them all. And he's just a one man. So a lot of the scholars say that we have to include the Muslim Imam in our dua. And what does it take? Nothing. You just ask Allah Azza wa Jal to appoint upon the Muslims who fears Allah Azza wa Jal and who would be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to choose the right path. This is different than polishing their image and lying to the public and saying things about them that are not true. So it's best for you to remain silent and not to mention them rather than to praise them with something that is not in them, so that you won't become part of the propaganda being spread. Focus on the welfare and the well-being of the Muslims. So ask Allah to appoint upon them who fears Him and who is righteous and guided. Also, among the things that people recommend during the khutbah of Jumu'ah is, and this is something that a lot of the Muslims fail to understand. The vast majority of Muslims in masjid during Jumu'ah, when the Imam makes dua, they raise their hands and say Ameen. Now, raising the hands is not from the Sunnah. The Sahaba and the Tabi'een used to narrate that what they had seen with their own eyes, which is no one, including the Prophet ﷺ, during the Friday sermon would raise his hands and make dua. And likewise, the companions would not do that. When the Prophet used to make dua, he used to point with his index finger. So he say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And he points while doing dua with his should be doing and not raising the hands. The only time for the Imam and the congregation to raise their hands is when the Imam is asking for rain. Allahumma asqina ghaythan tayyiban sayyiban mubarakan. Okay, now you raise your hands, because the Prophet used to raise his hands only when asking for rain. Other than that, he points his finger. Okay, what about us, the congregation? Should we also point our fingers? The answer is no. Keep your hands down and say Ameen, and you don't say it loudly, just say, move your lips with it, and that is sufficient. It is part of the recommendation that the orator, the one who gives the khutbah, is the same one who leads the prayer. But this is not mandatory, which means that if I gave the khutbah and I finished the sermon and the iqamah was given and I appoint someone else to lead the prayer, this is totally legit and there's no problem in that, inshallah. Part of the sunnah is to deliver the khutbah while standing. But if the imam is paralyzed, someone who cannot stand, or someone who is sick, and he delivers it sitting down, the khutbah is valid, inshallah. And part of the recommended things to do in the khutbah is to sit between the two khutbahs. See, Jumu'ah has two khutbahs, the first one and the second one, and in between it is sunnah for the imam to sit. Actually, it is also sunnah for the imam to sit once he enters the masjid and the muadhin is giving the adhan. So when I enter the masjid, I rise on the pulpit or the mimbar and I address the congregation facing them, giving my back to the qibla, saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and I sit down. This is when the muadhin stands up and he gives the khutbah, Inna alhamdulillah, etc. When I finish the first khutbah, I conclude it with whatever I want. Usually, people would say, أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. Or إن ربكم كان غفارا فاستغفروه. Or anything that leads to this. There is nothing prescribed. You can simply just sit down and that's it. There's no problem in that. Then after a short pause, what do we do in between the khutbahs? There's nothing prescribed. What do you mean when you say there's nothing prescribed? It means that people can ask Allah for forgiveness. People can make dua, because we know that there is an hour, which is a period of time, not 60 minutes. There's an hour in Jumu'ah where Allah answers your dua. People differ, whether it's when the imam enters, when the imam leaves down, whether it is the last hour of the day just before sunset of Friday. So in between the two sermons, when the imam is sitting down, there's no problem for you to make dua. There's no problem either for you to raise your hands, because this is dua on my own. And you say, oh Allah, forgive me, oh Allah, guide me, oh Allah, guide my children, oh Allah, do this, do that for me. There's no problem in that, none whatsoever, insha'Allahu azza wa jal. Part of the recommendations is that you stand on a high place. The mimbar should be elevated from the ground. And scholars say it's between 2 to 3 steps. And this is so that your voice as an imam would reach the back rows, and at the same time that those at the back can be able to visualize and see you. And if the masjid is so big and you go up a bit, they recommend it, but if you go a bit higher, there's no problem in that. Part of the recommendations also is that when a person is responsible for giving the Friday speech, he has to know that it is a sign of his knowledge to shorten the khutbah and to prolong. Others, when they pray this long, from 35 to 45 minutes, some may reach an hour, when they lead the Muslims in prayer, their prayer is so short, it barely completes 5 minutes. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, when a man makes his prayer long and his khutbah short, he demonstrates his good understanding. So this means that it is part of your knowledge and fiqh. This is not intended for itself. Rather, it means that a person should have the khutbah concise and to the point. When you ask Muslims who attend these hour-long khutbahs, after they come out of the masjid, how was the khutbah? They say, wow, man, this man is an orator. He can speak endlessly. His khutbah was so eloquent, fluent, mashallah. Yeah, what was it about? He said, I don't know. He spoke about everything, from the beginning of time to the day of judgment. I can't remember anything. He big loaf of bread, but there's no beef in it. So this is problematic. It's not how people are impressed by how eloquent and fluent you are. It is the benefit. So I'd rather that your speech is 10 minutes, 15 minutes at most, but the people come out almost remembering every word of it. And they come out with a theme, and they come out with points to be followed, rather than giving them a lecture type khutbah that they come out not remembering 10% of it. And this is why a lot of the youth tend to stay away from masjid. Masjid too, he makes me fall asleep. He speaks for an hour. I can't sit there for an hour. I don't understand what he's saying. So it's best to follow the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Also, among the recommended things to do is when the imam enters, in the beginning he has to say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And among the things that are recommended is, according to the textbook, not to me, according to the textbooks, it says that it's recommended to hold a staff and to look in front of him just as the Prophet used to do, alayhi salatu wasalam. First of all, looking at the staff, let me rephrase that. Using a staff is a stick. So in the beginning, the Prophet ﷺ used to hold something in his hand so that while standing, it would give him balance, like a bow, you know, the bow and an arrow, and a staff or a spear. And it was never reported authentically that he used to lean on a sword, as so many imams do, and they signify by this as a symbol that Islam was spread by the sword. Ibn al-Qayyim says that there is no evidence that is authentic backing it up. And the Prophet ﷺ used to use this staff, this spear, this bow to lean on while giving the khutbah before he was given the mimbar. After the mimbar was made by a carpenter who used to work for a woman from Medina, he would make him a pulpit, and the Prophet agreed. When they made it for him, then he had something to lean on to, and he stopped using the staff, the spear, or the bow. This is what the Prophet used to do, alayhi salatu wasalam. Nowadays, we find in some rural areas or in some big mosques in cities who the imams are not students of knowledge, but they're the best around, would come out with a big staff, with a big stick, and some would come with something different, maybe a sword or something, and they would carry it and use it while giving the khutbah. This is not part of the Sunnah, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Moving on to the section that has the title, What is Forbidden in Friday Prayers? Well, in the beginning, the khutbah itself, when the imam is giving khutbah, there are a number of things that are prohibited for the people in the congregation. Number one, to talk, period. So someone, while the imam is giving the khutbah, someone comes in, says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, how are you, Sheikh? You are not allowed to reply the salam to him, which is usually mandatory. But because the imam is giving khutbah, zip it, nothing. If a man next to me sneezes and says, Alhamdulillah, I would not say, Yarhamukumullah. If two people are sitting next to me and they're talking, or two children are talking, it is not permissible for me to say to them, shh. Even this is not permissible. Why? Because it distracts you from the khutbah. You must pay full attention, to the extent that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from even playing with the pebbles on the ground. Some people take their prayer beads, misbah, subha, tasbih, and it nullifies their Jum'ah. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever touches the stones, faqad lagha, he had committed an act of laghu, of failing to concentrate. And also whoever says to his brother, shh, or listen, he also has committed the same act. People play with their rings. This is all not permissible. Some scholars attending the Jum'ah, and man, you are drowsy, you're falling asleep, and the only way to get yourself awakened is to use a miswak. They said that for this reason, it is permissible and it won't be, inshallah, part of the things that are prohibited during salat. Part of the things that are prohibited for the congregation is when a person is a late comer. So the imam is giving the khutbah, and you find someone from the end of the masjid jumping the rows, and this is described in Arabic in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, crossing the necks. Because when I'm sitting next to someone next to me and you come and put your foot between our heads, you're actually crossing our necks. This is my neck, his neck, and you are stepping over it just to go to the front rows. Once the Prophet was giving the khutbah alayhi salatu in Jum'ah, in Friday, a man started doing this. So the Prophet alayhi salatu ordered him to sit down, and he said, Ijlis, sit down, faqad athayta, you've harmed others, wa anayta, and you are late. So a late comer should not do this because this is sinful. Stay where you are and pray where you are. He says, Sheikh, but I can see that there's some gap, some space in front. Well, this is to cross over people's rows. This distracts them and annoys them, and this is prohibited. Okay, only the imam may do this. Okay, this is understood. So the imam, if I'm the imam, I'm coming to give the sermon, and there's no entrance for me at the front of the masjid. In this case, I have to cross people's necks, meaning that I have to cross over the rows in order to reach where I want to reach, and this is permissible and halal for the imam. Also, you must not separate between two when you come. If there's a gap, sit. But if there's no gap, you should not ask the one to go to the left and the other one to go to the right in order for you to sit down, because this distracts them. And there is a hadith here that the Prophet ﷺ, whoever takes a bath on Friday, etc., then he goes to the masjid without separating between the two people. Yet this is most likely not prohibited, it is not recommended. And if I can create a gap to sit in between two people, especially when these two people are a little bit neither sitting next to one another nor leaving a gap, then it seems that it's permissible and it's not prohibited or haram. The following section deals with the minimum requirements. What is meant by the minimum requirements? So this is a bit ambiguous. It can mean how many people there should be in a congregation of Jum'ah. What's the minimum? So this is an issue of dispute. Some say 2 is the minimum because 2 is the least of a Jama'ah. If I pray alone, I'm a loner. If I pray next to when the imam gives the khutbah, there's only one person in the congregation and he cannot be a congregation. And this is why the most authentic opinion is that in order for a Jumu'ah to be valid, you have to have at least 3 people in it, an imam and 2 in the congregation. So this is a valid Jumu'ah. Other schools of thought say there have to be at least 40. Some say 12, some say this, but all of these do not have any evidences to back them up. The Jama'ah is considered to be a jama'ah, a congregation, when you have two or more, and this is excluding the imam. Minimum requirement can also refer to the minimum prayed or offered in a Jum'ah to be a valid Jum'ah. So if I come from the very beginning, my Jum'ah is valid without any doubt. What about if I skip the two sermons and I only attended the 2 rak'ahs of Jumu'ah? Again, the consensus of scholars, my congregation, my Friday is valid, but I've lost a lot of reward. What about if I miss 1 rak'ah and pray 1 rak'ah with the imam? Again, this is valid, but your dead end or your threshold or the minimum accepted is when the imam is in the ruku' position of the 2nd rak'ah and you come to the masjid. If the imam is in the 2nd rak'ah ruku' and you say Allahu Akbar and you attend him while he's in ruku', you are in ruku' at the same time, you manage to say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim once, and he says Sami Allahu liman hamidah, and you raise your head, this is a valid rak'ah, minimum requirement for a valid. But if you came into the prayer, he's in the 2nd rak'ah in the bowing position, and just as you 4 rak'ahs, yeah, but I attended the salat with the imam. No. Once the imam raises his head from the 2nd rak'ah, this means that you've missed the Friday and you have to pray 4 rak'ah of dhuhr. So the dividing line is to offer ruku' in the 2nd rak'ah with the imam. You miss this, you have to pray dhuhr prayer. The form. So how do we pray the Jumu'ah prayer? The khutbah, we've gone through that. And it is part of the condition, by the way, of the khutbah to be before the prayer. So if any person comes and prays Jumu'ah 2 rak'ahs and then gives the sermon afterwards, the prayer is invalid. It must be before the prayer itself. Also, another condition is that it should be and it must be audible. So if someone goes to the minbar and delivers 2 khutbahs without making a sound, he's the only one who's listening to himself, this Friday is invalid because it defies the purpose of having these 2 sermons. So what about the salat itself? How to offer these 2 rak'ahs of Jumu'ah? Well, you have to pray 2 rak'ahs like Fajr in every aspect. So it is 2 rak'ahs. It is prayed loudly, though it's in the door. And the Sunnah in these 2 rak'ahs to recite Surah Al-A'la in the 1st rak'ah and Surah Al-Ghashiyah in the 2nd rak'ah, which is Surah 62 and 63. And sometimes the Prophet used to recite Surah Al-Jumu'ah wal-Munafiqun, which is 87. Well, actually, I think I mixed the numbers. 60 Ghashiyah. But if you recite anything else, this is valid. And this is why the vast majority of imams usually do not stick to this, depending on the time, depending on their vocal cords. Sometimes people, when they give an oration and they shout and they're so engaged with it, when it comes to salat, they find themselves out of steam. They're unable to recite long surahs, so they choose short surahs. This is valid, this is permissible. It's not mandatory to recite those other surahs. and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. We have recommendations of the Jumu'ah, but this is going to take a lot of time, so I think we will stop here and go to the questions. And to go to the questions, we have to open the emails and to open the emails. Okay, Haslin says, will a woman be held accountable if she accepts to marry a man who is dealing in riba? When a man deals with riba, this is an open sin, in addition to the fact that his provisions that he brings home is haram. Having said that, the wife and the children, what they consume is halal, because the sin is on the person who's earning it. But to endorse such a job or occupation, to accept a man who deals with such a profession, is sinful and not permissible. So a woman must not accept marrying someone who deals with riba, such as those who work in conventional banks, riba-based or interest-based banking, or those insurance companies are based on riba and gambling. Santigay says, my question is, if you are in Sunnah fast and on taking ablution you are in doubt that whether the water passed your throat or not, what to do? The default is that it did not pass, and we know that doubts do not remove certainty. So as long as this is a doubt, ignore it. Secondly, even if it was not a doubt, even if you accidentally swallowed some of the water, again, due to the fact that it's unintentional and accidental, there's nothing wrong and there's no sin on you. Bearing in mind that in the hadith of Laqit ibn Sabra, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, the Prophet told me, alayhi salatu, to exaggerate in swirling water in my mouth and in my nose unless I am fasting. So you should try your level best not to do this in the future, but your fast is valid. Alice, she says, my beloved sister is dead. Only with prayers and dhikr for her, I want to do something that could be a source of continuous thawab, along with prayers and dhikr. So like sadaqah jariyah, please tell me about this kind of act. When a relative, a friend, the things that reach such a person in his grave are as follows. One, dua. When you make a lot of dua, oh Allah, expand their graves. Oh Allah, fill it up with light. Oh Allah, open a window to paradise. Oh Allah, make them happy. This is legit. Any dua you do, whether you're a relative or a loved one or a friend or someone even you don't know, it benefits them. Also seeking, when we say charity, when you give charity to feed the orphans, the poor, the refugees, the needy, this is something that would reach them. If you buy them clothes, if you settle them down, if you pay for their education, for their medication, all of this is charity that would reach them, or continuous charity. It has to continue benefiting people, because when you feed someone, after the meal is gone, that's it. But if you, for example, dedicate a farm for feeding the poor, the farm continues to supply them with food endlessly until, as long as the farm is existing and standing. Likewise, when you dig a well of water, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, the best of charity is providing drinking water. When you build a masjid, as long as people go in and pray, you are benefiting them, and you are benefiting the deceased, and he's gaining a lot of good rewards. If you publish a book, buy copies of the Qur'an and ship it to areas that they don't or cannot afford the Qur'an. If you support Islamic channels such as Huda TV, these guys are doing a wonderful job, and they're spreading Islam all over. If you support Islamic magazines that are real Islamic and authentic, that spreads the religion, all of these are continuous charity. Also, there is Umrah and there is Hajj. So proxy Umrah or Hajj, whether you do it or you pay someone to do it, this is also permissible. Umrah for you, they have no problem. Their salaries are like 1,200 riyals or 1,500 riyals, and they have a dozen of kids. So this is a win-win situation, and this is totally legit, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. What about reading the Quran and dedicating the khatm to the deceased? This is an innovation. It's totally prohibited. Rabaya says, I face difficult people and see and feel what they do and get onto shirk, or get up to shirk ideology. Then I recite, Ya makru, Ya makrullah, Wallahu khairul makirin, on the thought of Allah taking care of them in a manner He knows best. Reciting this ayah in my head, is it permissible? First of all, this is not an ayah. What you wrote is totally Yamkuruna wa yamkurullah. Yamkuruna wa yamkurullah wallahu khairul makirin. And reciting this ayah in your mind is not permissible, because this is not a dua. Ask Allah directly, oh Allah, protect me from these people, oh Allah, save me, oh Allah, grant me victory over them, or whatever. But don't recite something like this as it is an innovation. It's inappropriate. Shabiha says, I'd like to know if I would get the reward of one whole Qur'an if I read 3 times Surah Al-Ikhlas in my salat. We know that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said that Surah Al-Ikhlas, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, equals 1/3 of the Qur'an. So reciting it 3 times is as if you have read the whole Qur'an. The answer is yes. But there is a difference between al-jaza, which means the reward, and al-ijza, which is mean to suffice. So it's one of the pillars of Islam to perform Hajj once in a lifetime. True? It's true. The Prophet said in an authentic hadith, alayhi salatu wassalam, he who prays Fajr in congregation and remains seated in the masjid making dhikr until the sun rises, and he prays 2 rak'ah, Allah will reward him as if he had performed Umrah and Hajj complete. So a smart aleck comes and says, okay, pilgrimage is mandatory once in a lifetime. And the hadith says, if I do this easy task in an hour or so, I get the reward of a Hajj in addition to Umrah. So I don't need to do that. I don't need to perform Hajj. I said, no, you got it all confused. There's a difference between al-jaza and al-ijza. There's a difference between reward and to suffice you. So the reward, yes, you get the reward, but it does not suffice from the original task or the original work. And you have to do that as mentioned in the Qur'an or as mentioned per the Sunnah. And I hope this answers your question. Fazlur Rahman says, how to be persistent in prayers. Sometimes I do not like to pray. Please describe maybe penicillin, I don't know, for this problem. First of all, it is not a choice. It is not something you may pick up or not. This is an obligation. This is part of the tests that you are receiving on this earth, which would determine whether you will go to hell on the day of judgment or to paradise. If you are not persistent, if you're not regular, strong characteristic of the hypocrites. Allah described the hypocrites in Surah An-Nisa, and He said, وَإِذَا قَامُوا إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ قَامُوا كُسَالًا. Whenever they stand up to pray, they pray in the state of laziness. Allah described the hypocrites to pray, and you are not persistent and you are not doing that, which means, mentioned last session, that the most burdensome prayer upon the hypocrites, Fajr and Isha. Had they known what lies in them, they would have come crawling on their hands and knees. So the best motor, the best driver that would make you pray on time is to know the punishment, is to know that you are under the threat of being a hypocrite, a full-fledged hypocrite, and that the Prophet ﷺ almost burnt the houses of those who do not pray with him, and the only thing that prevented him from doing so was the fear of women and children being present. So I hope this acts as a wake-up call. Tahira, this is not a question. You're just describing what is happening to most people, and that is they're being engaged in this worldly life and neglecting Allah Azza wa Jal. Unfortunately, this is what's happening to all, or at least to most Muslims. Allah is at the list, at the bottom of their priority list. So when it comes to my wife or Allah's duties, no, my wife. My kids or kids. My parents, my parents. Allah or my work, no, my work. A priority. And you go on and on and on, which means that is it okay to divert my mind in regarding that is to divert my mind in reading books rather than listening to music. I was very fond of music. Now I know, alhamdulillah, from your lectures, music is haram. As long as you're occupying your time, Afrina, with something that is, if not beneficial, at least is permissible, you have the green light to do so. Listening to music is addictive, it is harmful, and it is above all prohibited in Islam. And those who argue don't know what they're arguing about. So they say you are hard-hearted people, you don't enjoy music, you this, you that. I don't agree. Because music is addictive. Because Allah, the one who created us, prohibited it upon us. And look at all the musicians, the pop stars, the singers, and look at the life they lead and the people they misguide. So this is totally prohibited. This is not the time to go into details, but if you are interested in reading novels that are halal, history books, encyclopedias, scientific books, journals, news, whatever, nope. I would highly recommend that you start studying Islam. Learn more about it, become a alima, become a student of knowledge, in order for you to convey the message to others like Allah has blessed you. Okay. So I think we will conclude with this question or the one after it. Al-Amin says, can you please help through a lecture on how people will do Umrah? I think if you're with us, Al-Amin, we are studying this textbook and we will come to the section that deals with Umrah and Hajj if Allah gives us life. Aisha says, is practicing acupuncture, acupressure or aquapuncture, Chinese medicine haram or shouldn't be practiced by Muslims? No, I believe that this is halal because it is not something that is of the unseen or seeking help from jinn. It deals with the human body. It deals with pressure points, with special areas that are known through trials and errors that have an impact on reducing the pain, on blocking some diseases and illnesses from passing through there. And with this, we come to the conclusion of today's session. Until we meet next Thursday, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.